Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. From the WHO, the World Health Organization was notified by a laboratory a confirmed case of a human infection of the influenza A H5N5 virus on the 1st of April 2024. It was posted by the U.S., the IHR National Focal Point. The patient developed symptoms on March 27 and had a history of exposure to dairy cows, presumed to be infected with influenza A. The first human infection of influenza A acquired from contact with infected cattle, and the second confirmed case detected in the country. No additional cases of human infection of influenza A have been identified at this time. And of course, Donald Trump is days away from his court hearings, which is actually in this particular case, I believe, going to become a criminal trial. And this is from the CNN. Former President Donald Trump, New York hush money trial is set to begin with jury selection April 15th, despite multiple attempts by his lawyers to push the trial dates back until after the 2024 elections. Trump's attorneys Monday urged the New York appeal court to postpone the trial to start date so that it could consider whether to change the venue, arguing that the former president cannot have a fair trial in New York, but the court denied the request. Separately, special counsel Jack Smith urged the Supreme Court on Monday to reject Trump's claim of sweeping immunity and to deny the former president any opportunity to delay the trial on any other charges that he attempted to subvert the results of the 2020 election. The Supreme Court will hear arguments on April 25, and the decision is expected by July. And of course, also still sticking with the CNN, they also reported more than 30 million people from Texas to western Mississippi are at risk of severe weather, and a powerful storm system to sweep through the region, and the about 9 million people in parts of Texas and western Louisiana had enhanced level 3 of or 5 of risk severe weather as I'm recording this today. In the Middle East, Israel's Prime Minister said the timing for the ground offensive in Rafah, where about 1.5 million Palestinians are sheltering, has been set, but did not reveal the date. That's not so much a shocker. He also said that the entry into Rafah was necessary to complete the victory over Hamas. After an announcement, the State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said to Israel had not briefed the U.S. on Rafah invasion's timing, and reiterated that the U.S. believes the ground offensive would have enormously harmful effect on civilians, and that it would ultimately hurt Israel's security. Meanwhile, the UN committee said it would review whether or not Palestine would be granted full member status in the United Nations this month. There's been several questions about Palestine getting full member status in the United Nations on the UN press room floor as of yesterday. And so that would do it for CNN. And there was one more briefing from the BBC that we should go through. And this one is actually a United States stories, but from the point of view of the BBC. Parents of the Michigan school gunman sentenced to at least 10 years imprisonment. If we remember, Jennifer and James Crumley, the first parents of a U.S. school shooter to be convicted, appeared today for the first time in months at Tuesday's hearing. Both regret about their son's attack, and as the lawyers pushed to minimize their sentence. In a landmark case, jurors in separate trials found each of the shooter Ethan Crumley guilty of involuntary manslaughter earlier this year. The judge, Cheryl Matthews, said that the expanded sentence to 10 to 15 years to act as a deterrent and reflect parents' failure to stop the attack. Which does bring the question, how far as parents, how far can we be held responsible for our children's actions? It's already a tough job to begin with, to ensure that we put values and rights into our children's hearts and minds, and this takes things to a new level of responsibility for our children. So why don't we move forward into the President of the United States, Joe Biden, as he makes some statements about care, medical care in the U.S., and we're also going to hear from the United Nations about Violence against ex-combatants from a former regime in Colombia, as the political unrest takes a different turn. And Colombia recently had elections and was able to oust those who are acting as autocrats. And now what happens to them at this point is what is actually coming into question. So why do we hear as that hit the United Nations, and what some of the resolutions and statements come out of that? What's up?
My name is Crystal Gail Crawford. I'm from Georgia, and I'm a proud child care worker. Yes, do we have any other child care workers in the building? Well, let me take you on a quick journey. I have been working as a nanny for 15 years. I loved my job. But like many of you, I lost my job during the pandemic. And then I was in a terrible car accident. Suddenly, I found myself without a job and chronic back pain. So I moved home, had surgery, and my parents cared for me. That's when I realized in a whole new way how important care is. It's a constant in my family. I relied on the care of my aunt, who was a pillar of strength. But in 2022, my aunt tragically passed away. So my mom stepped up. Even as she was grieving her sister, she took on the role of caring for her mother. Care doesn't wait for you to finish grieving. Witnessing my mom's dedication and selflessness was inspiring. Now, we all have someone in our lives who inspires us with their dedication. But I want us to pause for a moment, because in my story, that person is my mom. But in someone else's story, that's you. Yes, so point to yourself, because you are all someone's hero. Care is fundamental aspect of our humanity. That's why we are here today, to make the care we all need a reality and not a dream. Come on, friends, it is my great honor to introduce to you today our care champion-in-chief. He brought the care agenda to the forefront of our nation's economic agenda. He honors the essential work of care workers like myself, and he is ready to fight alongside us for the care we need and deserve in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome President Joe Biden.
As my mother would say, God love you all. Crystal, thank you for sharing your story. And a simple truth. Folks, you know, there's no better place for me to... Last year at this day, I declared Caregiver and Caregivers Month. And I couldn't think of no better place to celebrate it today than here at this station. I'll tell you why. For 36 years, I commuted from the state of Delaware to here every single day the Senate was in session, and over a lot of times. The reason I did is I think I understand a little bit what many of you have gone through and what you're trying to help with. You know, when I got elected, I was 29 years old. Wasn't old enough to be sworn in. While I was down here hiring staff, before I was sworn in, I got a call saying my wife and daughter were dead. My 2 boys were badly injured. And so, you know, I wasn't going to come down, but I had thank God I had a family and a lot of friends and older members like me, 45, 50, who helped me out. But all kidding aside, I didn't have them. I just started a law practice. I didn't have any money. I mean, I made a living, but I didn't have any money. And what I tried to do is figure out how I was going to raise my boys. No, I'm serious. And I tell you what, I really wonder, why did I commute every single day? Over 1 million miles round trip over the time I was in the United States Senate. And the reason I did, I couldn't afford a house down here without selling my house at home. And I couldn't afford caregiving. The God's truth. No possibility. None whatsoever. But I'm lucky I had a family. My mother, my father, my sister, my brother all moved in, helped me take care of my kids. But then we ended up with mom getting sick and dad getting sick, and we took care of them. The so-called sandwich generation. Look, you care workers represent the best of who we are as Americans. Oh, you really do. We look out for one another in America. We leave nobody behind. Nobody behind. And you've said all the heroes and the lives you talk about, well, you're our heroes. You're the heroes to so many individuals. You really are. And you represent so many people who do it, and do it out of love and concern, not because of the pay, because they're not getting the pay they need. It matters. As your president, I'm here with a simple message. I give you my word, I have your back. I also want to thank the family of Audie Barkin, whose widow Rachel and her son here, Carl, are here just backstage, just met with them. Their family embodies why care matters. It's critical to the dignity of care, the dignity of all caregivers and workers. My dad used to say a job, Joey, give him my word, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. No, it really is. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. Care workers and caregivers are critical to our families and to the entire economy. That's why as a candidate, as president, I was determined to turn things around. We made progress, but there's so much more that we have to do. So much more. If we want the best economy in the world, we have to have the best caregiving economy in the world. We really do. They're not inconsistent, they're consistent. But the cost of care is too high, and pay for care workers is much too low. Take child care. A typical family spends $11,000 a year on child care per child. Per child. If you live in a big city, that can be $17,000 for each child. More than their college tuition, if God willing you're able to get there. And a lot of parents do the math and realize they can't afford to go to work because child care can sometimes literally cost more than they earn. More than they earn. You know, take-home care, the cost of long-term care for aging loved ones and people with disabilities rose 40% in the last decade. Medicaid offers help, but it can't meet the demand. You know, there are 700,000 seniors waiting in line. 700,000 waiting in line. And people with disabilities are stuck in Medicaid home care waiting lists for as long as 10 years if they survive to be qualified. It's amazing. Think about it. Family members like ours and yours often spend their own retirement savings to pay for the care of the loved ones. Others leave their jobs to care for them. And millions are part of the so-called sandwich generation, taking care of both your kids and your aging parents at the same time. At least that's been the experience of the Biden family. It's overwhelming. Take paid leave. We're the only advanced economy in the world not to guaranteed paid leave. We're going to change that. That means to help a loved one, many folks have to leave work to find out later that they've been fired. In the United States of America, no one should choose between caring for a parent who's raised them, a child who depends on them, or a paycheck that they need. That's not why it should be the way it should be. No, I'm serious. You wonder whether I feel strongly about this? I do. Look, more often than not, from child care to elder care to lack of paid leave, it's women who bear the brunt. Women who bear the brunt. We saw that during the pandemic when 2 million women left their jobs to help take care of their families. It hurts our whole economy to lose so much talent in the workplace. And it keeps women from earning equal pay they deserve because they say, well, you haven't been here. Look, in fact, care workers are predominantly women as well, women of color and immigrants who are overworked, overlooked, and underpaid. It's not enough just to praise them for all they're doing, we have to pay them. To invest in our care economy, as soon as I came to office, I signed the American Rescue Plan. Not a single Republican voted for it, I might add, not one. It made our nation's biggest investment in child care ever. For example, it kept 225,000 child care workers, child care working centers open, giving parents an opportunity to get back to work. Well, I tell you what, you want to come make a speech or shush up, okay? I'm not messing around with him. He looks like he could take me. Ask me. Look, it expanded the child care tax credit, cutting child poverty in America in half. That's what it did. It cut it in half. Overall, my administration increased funding for nearly 50%, by 50% for child care. And in the coming weeks, we plan to release new rules to strengthen staffing standards in nursing homes, to get home care workers a bigger share of Medicaid payments. But that's not going to be enough. I want to do more, and we can do more. My budget for next year makes key commitments to children, seniors, and people with disabilities, and to caregivers who look after their loved ones. First, for working families with small children, we're going to guarantee affordable quality child care. Most families, in our plan, most families will pay less than $10 a day per child, saving millions of folks as much as $7,000 a year. That's a lot of breathing room for young families who need it badly. We'll also restore the expanded child care tax credit, lifting millions of children out of poverty. And by the way, this helps the economy. It doesn't hurt it helps the economy. You know, our Republican friends let that expire. Well, we got to expire a couple of them politically in order to get this passed. Together, we're going to bring it back. Second, seniors and people with disabilities, we're going to expand Medicaid home care services and reduce that 700,000 person backlog. That'll mean more folks can live and work in their own communities with dignity and independence. More home care workers will start getting a better pay and benefits and dignity they deserve. By the way, if anybody's listening besides all of us, we agree on this. This is really, we're deadly earnest. This is not a joke. It matters. Third, for everyone caring for a loved one, my budget would finally create a national paid family and medical leave program. Finally. Up to 12 weeks to care for a newborn, a sick loved one, or yourself without losing your income. Look, it's past time America caught up with the rest of the world on paid leave. And folks, all this helps families and it grows the economy. It grows the economy. And we can afford to do it. To put it another, we can't afford not to do it. Look, I'm a capitalist, but I want to make sure that, if you make $1 million, great. Just start paying your fair share in taxes. But let me ask you, does anyone here think this tax code is fair? Raise your hand. I don't either. The last administration enacted a $2 trillion tax cut, overwhelmingly benefiting the very wealthy and the biggest corporations, and exploded the federal deficit more than any other president has. We've cut the deficit, by the way. It added more to the national debt than any presidential term in history, and it's due to expire next year. And guess what? I hope to be president because it expires. It's going to stay expired. Stay expired. Our administration has already cut the deficit by $1 trillion. And I'm going to cut it even more this decade by making big corporations and the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Under my plan, nobody earning less than $400,000 a year will pay an extra penny in taxes. I hope that is best. As to make it clear, we're not trying to beat people. There are 1,000 billionaires in America, from 750 to 1,000 since the pandemic. You know what the average tax rate those billionaires pay? 8.2%. No, I'm serious. Anybody want to trade that tax rate? Well, look, that's far less than the vast majority of Americans pay. No billionaire should pay lower tax rate than a teacher, a firefighter, a care worker. And that's why I proposed a minimum tax for billionaires of 25%. It's not even the highest rate, just 25%. And guess what? It's more fair. But it also, guess what it would do over 10 years? It would raise $500 billion. $500 billion. And it wouldn't hurt anybody. I'm a capitalist. If you make $1 billion, wonderful. Pay your fair share. Imagine what we can do. Imagine what we can do for America. Look, folks, imagine a future with affordable child care, home care, elder care, paid leave. But folks, our Republican friends have a different vision. Republicans in the House of Representatives, and by the way, Rosa DeLauro, she was here, I was told, she's a hell of a champion for all that. They just released their budget, the Republicans, that cuts caregiving programs by a third, the ones that exist, cuts them by a third. For example, it would mean 260,000 fewer kids in child care. My predecessor and his MAGA friends want to, I love the phrase, the language they use, they want to terminate the Affordable Care Act. Terminate. Well, guess what? Killing millions of Americans, take them off of health care, insurance, is stripping others of services like home care. Folks, by the way, you know how many times they've tried to take out Obamacare and Affordable Health Care Act? 49 times they've tried. They can keep trying, but they're not going to get it done. And look, when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, my predecessor recently said, quote, there's a lot you can do in terms of cutting. God love him. Right on cue, House Republicans released their budget that would raise the retirement age of Social Security, the budget they submitted for next year, and slash Medicare while they cut taxes for the very wealthy again. I got a better idea. I'll protect Social Security and Medicare and make the very wealthy pay their fair share to make it work. Look, let me conclude where I started by thanking all of you. As Crystal said, you're all, and I mean this sincerely, you're all somebody's hero. That's what I see in our nation's caregivers, heroes. We need you. Not a joke, we need you. And together, I know we can do this. I've never been more optimistic about our future. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity. Nothing. If we do it together. So let's stay at work, get to work, keep working, and God bless you all, and may God bless our troops. Thank you.
I now give the floor to Mr. Carlos Ruiz Massieu.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate this opportunity to brief the Security Council On this symbolic day in Colombia, dedicated each year to the victims of the armed conflict, they should always be at the center of our efforts to build peace in Colombia and elsewhere. I welcome the presence today of Minister of Foreign Affairs Luis Gilberto Murillo and express once again my appreciation for the continued support of the government of Colombia to the work of the verification mission. I also welcome today the participation of Ms. Marcela Sanchez from the NGO Colombia Diversa, which gives visibility to the impact of conflict on women and LGBTI persons and their important role as peace builders. I would also like to recognize the attendance today of Roberto Vidal, President of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, and recognize his leadership into this important at this important moment of the jurisdiction. Madam President, distinguished members of the Council, Colombia has reached an important juncture in relation to its ambitions of implementing the 2016 peace agreement and of advancing its ongoing dialogue initiatives. As the Security Council was able to observe firsthand during its recent visit, there is a deep desire for peace in Colombia that extends from highest levels of government and state institutions across civil society and to vulnerable communities in the regions still afflicted by conflict. The key challenge for transforming that aspiration into reality is to channel the abundant political will and impressive drive of civil society into ever more tangible dividends of peace on the ground. This effort will require Colombians to overcome divisions in an effort that should unite them across the political spectrum based on a common interest in securing a peaceful future.
Madam President, distinguished members of the Council, the transitional justice system which was set forth in the agreement bears witness to the trust built by the parties at that time in order to resolve an armed conflict which has affected Colombia for almost half a century. The system has struck a sensitive balance which is fundamental to sustain in order to fulfill the principle of keeping the victims at the center and to bring about the so desired transition towards peace. As part of this system, the Truth Commission played a vital role in shedding light on the historical truth of the conflict, in addition to the mandate of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, which is focused on investigating the most emblematic and representative cases, as well as the patterns of most serious crimes associated with them, and sanctioning those responsible for these crimes. The SJP's responsibility is intrinsically related to the transition from a war situation to a peace situation. And this is a task which is of monumental importance, which requires focusing on multiple different elements. Rigor, which is expedited, as well as focusing on the rights of the victims, the legal security, and the process of reintegration, and those appearing before the jurisdiction, honoring the commitments acquired under the agreement. Autonomy and independence for decision-making have been key for the SJP in order to fulfill its mandate, and it has done it that way and will continue to do so. Its framework, moreover, is determined by the balance struck in the agreement by the parties in formalizing them in law. I'd like to commend the fact that the SJP is increasingly close to handing down its first sanctions, and the victims need this, and they need it without further delay. Given recent difficulties, I take this opportunity to echo the call of the Secretary General to all involved parties to create the best possible conditions so that this culminating moment, which has been so awaited, will take place through constructive dialogue in order to overcome obstacles and to find solutions within the framework of the agreement. Colombians have given us many examples of resolving conflict through dialogue, and I trust that this will not be an exception to the rule.
While thousands of former FARC-EP members who laid down their weapons in good faith have stood by their commitments as per the agreement, the need for concrete and sustainable progress in its implementation has become ever more pressing with time. In this regard, I recommend a better use of the architecture for the implementation of the agreement, including the Commission for the follow-up, promotion, and verification of the implementation of the final agreement, CCB. In addition, I call upon the government to finalize the legal instruments to allow the swift implementation of the comprehensive reintegration program, as well as the national reintegration system, in order to provide these men and women with certainty and consolidate their transition into civilian life. Security also constitutes a key component of the reintegration of the former combatants and continues to be of the utmost concern. Regrettably, 11 more ex-combatants have been killed since the last report was issued. And as the Security Council heard repeatedly during its recent visit, social leaders, as well as entire communities, particularly Indigenous and Afro Colombians, still suffer the full impact of persisting violence and the limited presence of state institutions in various regions. In my recent visits to Cauca, Valle del Cauca, and Norte de Santander, this call for security was a common plea from ethnic groups, local authorities, civil society, as well as the private sector. The election last month of a new Attorney General, Luz Adriana Camargo, provides an opportunity to investigate and prosecute with renewed vigor those responsible for crimes against former combatants and social leaders. I met recently with her, and I was encouraged that her immediate priorities include the strengthening of the Special Investigation Unit created by the agreement, as well as broader efforts to combat the criminal structures responsible for the violence. Señora Presidenta,
Madam President, distinguished members of the Council, the current bilateral ceasefires are a significant step forward in order to build trust in negotiations and to reduce violence in the country. However, they do not replace security policy in the state's hand, which are geared to providing protection and well-being for those communities that are affected by the conflict. To the contrary, these efforts must be complementary to each other. Many of these policies are contemplated in the agreement, such as, for example, the policy of dismantling armed groups or the government's defense policy with its focus on human security. I trust that there will be progress in implementing it without further delay. In a challenging context for the negotiating table, with some significant differences to resolve between the parties, the government and the National Liberation Army, the ELN, who will meet this week in Caracas, Venezuela. On this occasion, I hope that they will be able to evaluate implementation of what was agreed to date and take decisions in order to make progress on implementing the agenda agreed in the Mexico agreement. I trust that the parties, with firm support from the international community, will be able to overcome the difficulties of the current situation, and that they will be able to reaffirm to Colombian society the National Bureau's commitment to reach definitive agreements with tangible benefits for the communities. Turning now to the dialogues between the government and the group known as the EMC, I urge the parties to remain focused on resolving their differences at the negotiating table, despite current difficulties, and they should do so taking into account the unique opportunity which exists right now in order to contribute to a different future. To achieve that, It is key that they build on progress achieved to date and that they provide clear demonstrations of their determination for peace. Any hostility vis-a-vis the civilian population sends the contrary message. It would erode the confidence built between parties and society, which would see it as evidence of condemnable acts of violence against the indigenous population in Cauca, or which led to this partial suspension of the ceasefire by the government.
A roadmap for dealing with some of the structural causes of conflict in Colombia was laid out in the first chapter of the Agreement on Rural Reform. It aims to resolve, amongst other matters, the historical inequities of land tenure that have endured for decades. Among its priorities are the distribution, formalization, and restitution of land, as well as the delivery of public goods and services to rural Colombia. While there is still a long way to go to meet the ambitious goals of the peace agreement, the Secretary General in his report recognizes significant increases in budget allocations and efforts of the current government to deliver land and resolve land-related conflicts. A continuous drive to implement these provisions, backed with substantial investments and the coordinated engagement of all relevant ministries and state institutions, is needed to overcome inequalities that have long fueled cycles of violence in the countryside. Similarly, the agreement's ethnic chapter and gender provisions seek to address the long-standing exclusion and disproportionate impact of the conflict on Indigenous and Afro Colombian communities, as well as on women and LGBTQ persons. I look forward to concrete results towards the goal of achieving 60% of implementation of the ethnic chapter by 2026. I also trust that the soon-to-be-launched National Action Plan for Security Council Resolution 1325 will help further the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda in the country. It will be important to ensure overall coherence between the plan and the gender provisions of the agreement. Furthermore, the principles of the plan regarding women's participation and the crafting of agreements that account for the gender dimensions of conflict and peace building should be duly considered and reflected in ongoing dialogue initiatives with armed groups. Madam President, distinguished members of the Council, the visit by the Council in February was an expression of support for the creative and courageous efforts underway in Colombia. I am certain that the visit provided much-needed encouragement to all sectors of society to persevere in their struggle for peace. However difficult and demanding of patience, Colombia's decision to prioritize dialogue as a principal means to resolve conflicts sets the country apart as a model that is more relevant than ever in today's world. I trust that this Council will echo our calls to encourage all actors in Colombia to redouble their efforts to implement the 2016 peace agreement and to pursue dialogue as a way to further consolidate peace in the country. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank Mr. Ruiz Massieu for his briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Marcella.
Okay, final thoughts, and thank you for listening to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. And of course, I'm your host, Michael Clogs. How far do we have to go as parents being held responsible for our children's actions? As we heard a case in Michigan, Ethan Crumley, a school shooter, his parents were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and are being held accountable for their son's actions. There's a lot to be thought about here. What could they have done more to prevent him from taking a gun and going and shooting up a school? And these mass shootings are a particular problem in the United States. And is this going to teach parents to get better control of their children, or is it going to send radical factions in a tailspin and make them want to teach their children to be more aggressive? We'll have to see how that actually plays out. But I know as a parent, to teach my children not to hate and to love, it was more important for me to teach them to love than not to hate. It's a big difference. We teaching our kids to respect every life that is out there and to do as little harm as possible. Thank you for listening to us. Please find that subscribe button wherever it may be so you can get more continued updates from us. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.